It's another beautiful day here in Del Mar, 70 degrees, and this morning I'm at the Stratford Court Cafe. Today's program we're going to look at a few of the interesting aspects of childhood. Autism later, and right now we're going to look at adoption. I'm joined by Lisa Lutz, who has actually been to Russia a couple of times to add a few new members to her family. Lisa, thanks for having us here, and it's wonderful to have you here.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.
Now, I understand you have the cafe. What's your husband Stephen's role in the cafe business here?
Well, he's really the conductor of this symphony here. He really runs the show on a daily basis, and so many people will know him as the tall, red-headed guy that's here with a very welcoming smile, and so he runs the cafe on a daily basis, and then I help with special projects and community relations and things of that nature.
Okay, so somewhere amidst, and I know you're a professional recruiter, so somewhere amidst your busy lifestyles, you've managed to make your way to Russia how many times?
We have been there 3 times to adopt 2 children.
Okay, and tell me about your children.
Well, we first adopted our son Peter back in 1999, and we made one trip then to adopt him, and that was in May. And then several years later, back in 2001, we decided to adopt a little brother for Peter, and we went to St. Petersburg twice in the process of adopting William.
Okay.
When President Putin came into power, there were some changes in the adoption system, and so we had to make 2 trips as the part of the process to adopt William. So we went in 2001 2 times, in February and then again in April, to finalize the process to bring him home.
Okay, so now a lot of people obviously look into adoption as a way to have a family. Why Russia over America, South America, East Asia? There's a lot of places you can adopt a child from these days.
Well, we liked the idea of the international adoption programs being so final. Here in the United States, unfortunately for adoptive parents, the birth mother, it does have a time period to change her mind. Even after a child has been born and gone into an adoptive family, the mother can say, "I'm sorry, I want my baby back," and that can be several months after a family having that child. And that wasn't something that I knew that I would be able to deal with.
Yeah.
So we felt very comfortable adopting from overseas, and when we found out that Russia was a country where we could adopt a child, it just sounded perfect for us, mostly because on my dad's side of the family, there's some Russian lineage there, so we just felt like that would be a nice kind of connection for them to have
in your family,
in our family.
Okay, and did you look into the process in other countries, like so that's out of America? When you look, sort of, what's the difference? The relinquishment of birthrights or something, or
well,
besides the lineage?
First, we back in the late 90s, Russia was just becoming popular for a place to adopt children. Initially, we had people that had already adopted children that we knew. Many of them had adopted children either from Asia or from South America, so we had looked into Brazil and some other countries, started making some phone calls, and when we found out, first we had looked into the Ukraine, and when we found out that the youngest that you could get a child was at least 2 years old, we decided to do a little more exploration and found out about Russia, that you could adopt an infant. And so once we heard that, we just decided to go for it.
Okay. And what sort of process do they put you through? Obviously, there's the two sides of parents selecting a child or falling in love with a child, and then there's the agencies who screen the parents. So what sort of process was that for you?
Well, it's really interesting because here in the United States, really adoptive parents are selected by the birth mother. They put together a portfolio and, you know, with every hope and prayer, hope that someone selects them to be the parents of their biological child. Whereas overseas, there's a shift where the adoptive parents are the ones who drive the selection process more, and so we.
That could be very dicey here if you have particularly a young mother. You know, really your fate then rests in the hands of maybe a teenage girl, or, you know, I mean, I'm not saying it's always young women that are giving away their babies, but I mean that really does.
So what's involved for adopting for anybody, and also for adopting overseas, is you have to have a home study done, and that's where the social services agency in your state. That they do a criminal background check. You have interviews with social workers. You have a lot of questionnaires you need to fill out. I actually, and you need to take parenting classes. I only wish they had the same criteria for biological parents. I mean,
that'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the world could use that. So anyway, we filled out. It's a lot of filling out of forms, and it's not. I always joke with people. I'll say, hey, I'd rather fill out the paperwork than have stretch marks any day. You know, it's really
some definite advantages.
It's not that big of a deal. So you fill out some paperwork, and then you submit your papers. Your dossier. We worked with an agency, and they did everything for us. They made it really easy. And
so a good agency is key.
Absolutely, absolutely. The agency makes your experience really fun and exciting, or it makes it drudgery.
Right.
And so we were very fortunate. We've used the same agency. We're going to be adopting again in 2005, and we're going to use the same agency because they made it just so enjoyable for us, exciting.
Now, another aspect of this, I guess, is adoption versus infertility treatments. So there's a number of reproductive techniques now that people can use in lieu of adoption. Why was that not an avenue that you pursued?
Well, I think a lot of people are led to believe that infertility treatments are the answers to their to their prayers in terms of having a family. And from talking to people, we knew that that's not necessarily the case. Going through infertility is a very difficult process, both physically and emotionally,
and financially.
Right, there's no guarantee. We just were so open to adoption from the get-go that we never even really considered going through fertility. And the thing that's so interesting to me is when I speak, like when we were actually going to Russia to adopt our children, there were other families that had gone through infertility treatments, and I think all of them said, if I had known what this was like beforehand, I never would have gone through that process. Once you get the baby in your arms and you say, oh my gosh, this is wonderful, they wouldn't have gone through that process.
Because I know a number of people that I've talked to, the fear of actually not loving the child, the infertility treatment is driven by having a biological child or a biological connection, as opposed to being able to love, or the fear of loving a stranger, essentially.
Yeah.
But you didn't find that an issue.
No, and I think that almost every adoptive parent almost giggles, laughs at that suggestion that you don't, that they don't have a bond with their child that isn't exactly like that of as if they had their own biological child. Because if you're looking to adopt, if you want to have children, you have that nurturing spirit, and you want to care for a child, and
who's not going to respond to that?
Yeah, there's
and vice versa.
Especially with the infants, it's just so easy. I mean, the first time I saw the video of my son, I thought, wow, this child can be my child, and oh, look at him, gurgle, and look at him do this, and oh, isn't he cute? And you just, you want to be a parent, and you just find ways to bond with. It just happens naturally. It's not as challenging as people think.
So, what do your children know about their heritage or sort of the adoptive process?
Well, really, the history. It's really important for adoptive parents to create a history in a certain way, which begins with their adoption process of even filling out paperwork or, creating photo journals. And so for us, we started with taking lots of photos from our trip to Russia of us getting them and seeing them for the first time, and this is where we stayed and all that type of stuff. And so we have that for them to show them, like, look how happy I was when I saw you for the first time. And then later on we tell them that we're just very open with them, and they know that they're adopted, and that it's we have very positive feelings about that.
Right.
And you have to verbally enforce that with them, like, I'm so glad that we adopted you. I'm the luckiest mom in the world.
Right. Positive experience for everybody.
They don't know anything different than it being positive.
How much does it cost, do you think, for an adoption process, just generally?
It does vary somewhat from domestic versus international and from country to country. It's somewhere in the mid 20,000 range. However, most people don't know, but there are now a substantial tax credit, not a deduction, but up to a $10,000 tax credit.
Wow. Okay.
Which really helps people quite a bit, which you don't get to take advantage of if you go through fertility.
Yeah, definitely.
So
if I was looking to adopt a child, what would be a good avenue for me to start?
Well, I would, if you know people that have adopted, then I always think that word of mouth is a good way to start. I know that we used an agency in Fullerton called Nightlight Christian Adoptions, and they do domestic and international adoptions. And just get information and read and talk to people and find a good agency and let them help you instead of reinventing the wheel. Use someone who's done it thousands of times over, so that it's a really fun, enjoyable process for you.
And the agency is tried and tested through somebody.
Exactly.
Is there a local group? Like, do you have your family, and it looks like it's, in fact, I'm not going to be able to put that last question to you because it looks like we've run out of time.
Okay.
Very quickly. So Lisa, thank you very much for allowing us to use the cafe. It's been a wonderful setting for us to do the program, and we'd like to come back again maybe some other time.
Anytime.
Okay,
it's been great. Thank you.
It's been great talking to you about going to Russia, and good luck on the next addition to your family.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be back after a short break for more of Coffee Talk in Del Mar.
Wherever you go, you see the signs. A new century is coming, and with it, 1,000 questions. Will there be peace? Will your family ever be in harm's way? Will a small town in Texas be hit with a hurricane? Will your daughter ever need a new kind of blood treatment? Will that nice man who hands you the paper ever need a hand to hold in a time of need? We have no crystal ball for the world that awaits, just one promise. We'll be there, whether it's in the eye of the storm, in your darkest hour, in your time of need, or in the light of day. We'll be there.
I come from Ukraine. For 52 years, I'm in United States. For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth. This country, if you put your mind in anything, you will succeed. We are free. We can travel. We can go any place. We can, whatever we want. Freedom to me means my life.
Glad you're still with us for Coffee Talk in Del Mar. I'm your host, Debi Salmon, and my next guest is a mother of an autistic child who speaks and writes on autism spectrum disorders throughout the country. So welcome, Chantal Sicile-Kira.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, I understand you've been living in Del Mar how long?
About 7 years.
Okay, so you make your home here most of the year.
Yes, I do.
But you do travel abroad a lot. So
Yes.
why visiting other countries?
Well, because I lived in France for 13 years and in England for 3 years. My parents are French and they immigrated here. So I was raised bilingual and bicultural, and I have dual citizenship, and I really enjoy France.
Excellent.
As well as Del Mar.
Two beautiful places.
Yes, exactly.
Now, an interesting statistic that I read from the Center for Disease Control, it used to be that autism was found in 1 out of every 10,000 children, and today it seems to be occurring in 1 out of 163 children.
That's correct.
What do you think is happening there?
Well, there are a lot of different factors involved. Some people might say that people are diagnosing better, that doctors are diagnosing better because they know more about autism. Other people say it's also because they've changed the definition and widened it so that people who before were just considered odd and eccentric or Asperger's are now considered as being on the spectrum. And those cases are probably true, but they don't account for the huge increase in autism. And it's now recognized that there is a huge increase that's due to unknown environmental factors.
Wow, okay, all right. Well, things certainly are changing in the environment. And I think we
Yes.
can talk about a number of those, because I think you see a lot of other disorders cropping up, autoimmune disorders that are related to diet, toxins.
ADD.
Right, okay. Which is ADD actually something, the behavioral characteristics under the umbrella of autism?
No, they're separate from autism, but now there's discussion that it could be not parallel, but a continuation of it. But it's definitely separate, but it's related in terms of some of the behaviors and some of the reasons why people might have ADD.
Okay, because we're not talking about autism per se, it's actually autism spectrum disorder. Is that right? That's the new
correct. That's
category
correct,
or
because
whatever.
before people used to really make a difference between two types of autism, one which was called the Kanner autism, because that was discovered by Dr. Kanner, and those were the very less able, low functioning, we used to call them, autistic people who would just sit and twiddle with string and never had language and had low ability to take care of themselves.
Right.
And then we had the Asperger's, and those were the type that were studied by Dr. Asperger, and these were the people who were high functioning but still had odd behaviors. The reason why and then there's ones in between, but the reason why they're considered on the same spectrum is that you have impairments in 3 areas, and one is communication, the other is social skills, and the third one is obsession with or unusual use of objects and things.
Right, okay.
So it looks a little different in someone who has Asperger's or who's on the high functioning end, and it looks different in someone who's less able. Like, for example, a less able person may not be able to speak. He may not be verbal. That's his communication difficulty. But someone who's very able will have really good language but can only understand the literal sense of things. So, for example, if you said, wow, this ice cream really knocks my socks off, the person would get really afraid because they imagine
Their
the
socks are going to fly
flying
off the room.
their,
Right, okay.
their legs.
Okay, right.
So
Now one of the things I've seen is that early intervention can make a profound difference between, I guess, low functioning or high functioning. Maybe there's new terminology for that. Do you agree with that, the take on that?
yes, early intervention, absolutely. In fact, it's the only thing that's shown by research to be helpful is early intervention with applied behavior analysis.
Okay.
So they have found that for a certain group of children with autism, that half of the children will grow up to be teenagers or adults and be practically unidentifiable with their other peers.
Okay.
In mainstream situations.
Okay, so now you mentioned the applied behavior analysis, and that's Ivar Lovaas, is that right?
Well, actually, he's famous for having done the research and also having developed a program. But actually, ABA has been around for many, many years. In fact, 25 years ago, when I first worked at Fairview State Hospital in Orange County, I used ABA to teach very less able, developmentally disabled individuals how to tie their shoes, how to use a toothbrush, how to do the everyday things they needed to do in life. And it was very behavioral. But Lovaas is famous because he put together a program to help specifically autistic children, and he also did the study that showed that 40 hours a week of intensive therapy is what made the difference.
Okay, so that is very resource intensive. If you're talking about
Yes.
a child in a school system or even a child in a family with
Yes.
multiple children, non-autistic children, that's a parent or a caregiver putting that time towards a child.
And that is why it's so difficult for the government or for any government to admit of the high increase in autism, because it's astounding to them. Where is this autism coming from? And secondly, what are we going to do to help all these people? Because it is so intensive and so expensive for school districts
Right.
to provide this therapy.
It's not sustainable. I mean, surely the resources that we have to
That's
look into
correct.
causative effects and try to reverse that
That's
trend.
correct.
Okay, so let's look at some of those causative facts. What do you think are some of the things that contribute?
Well, the only thing that's been proven about autism is that there's a genetic predisposition, and then that some kind of environmental influence comes into play. So that's the only thing that everyone generally takes, maybe proven is the wrong word, but takes as
Reliable
knowledge.
Okay.
But what happens is people argue about what it is that's causing the autism, what is making that predisposition reappear, make the autism come out.
Okay, because it's not just one gene. It's actually
No,
a
there's
whole...
quite a few, and actually there's only one gene for sure that's been reliably tested for, yes,
Associated.
this one is associated with autism. But then there's a whole bunch of other genes that, yes, it's probable, but they're not 100% sure.
Okay, so then what's happening with things like, we've got vaccines, thimerosal is a mercury preservative, there's plenty of mercury toxicity in the environment through, our essential
Right.
fatty acid food sources are
yeah,
loaded up
this
with
is
it.
the vaccine thimerosal connection or possible connection is a very difficult thing to prove. And I kind of liken it to when you have candidates that are running for president. As soon as you have a candidate who says, I'm going to run for president, the other side, Democrat or Republicans, start saying, oh, well, he can't because he had an affair, or, he slept with the girl once, or there's always some reason why that person is not a good candidate, which, then he has to step down. Well, when it comes to studies about vaccine and autism, a study will come out either showing a connection or showing there is not a connection, and immediately the other side pulls out all the reason why that research was no good. And so if you're a member of the general public and you rely just on the headlines, you think there is no connection or there is a connection depending on who's writing the article.
Right.
And, when you read the article, you think, well, that's a good analysis, but you don't know. You really have to go back to the original research and report. But most of us don't know how to read all of those figures
Highly
and what does it mean.
scientific papers.
And yeah, so it's really, really difficult to ascertain what kind of connection there is or isn't. But I really think that there must be a connection for a subset of children. I mean, it only stands to reason that people have allergies.
Right.
So why couldn't someone be allergic to thimerosal? Or look at the number of vaccinations we're giving now to people. Some people's immune systems may not be able to handle that, and you don't know which baby can or can't.
Right.
So I'm not saying that vaccines cause cancer, or wrong
Autism.
show here, cause autism, but I'm saying that for some children it could be a factor.
Right. Well, I think generally across the population, our immune systems are more compromised than they used to be. Our
That's
environment
correct.
is more toxic. Our diets, our baseline health
That's
is quite
correct.
very different than it was a couple of generations ago.
Yeah, and another example is for children with autism, some have discovered that it's just allergies that are creating these, again, behaviors. Because again, as I said, a diagnosis of autism is not a test. You can't take a blood sample and say, oh, this person has autism. It's behavioral characteristics.
Right.
So someone has an immune system that's not working, or an allergy to gluten or dairy products. And what happens is they have these behaviors because they're so uncomfortable. Well, when you clear that up, you find that a lot of the autistic behaviors go away. Again, this is a subset.
Right.
And that's why it's so hard about autism, because it's not that one cause that we're going to find.
Right.
The theory is that there are going to be many different causes that we find.
Yeah, I looked at a long list, Candida, so there were viral
That's
and
correct.
fungus, a large overgrowth, depletion of B6, depletion of magnesium, high mercury toxicity, which could be environmental or could be, could be about the autoimmune weakness in that particular person. Where does that come from?
Yeah, it's really difficult. And the other thing that's really interesting is that over the last 20 years, you can actually see a difference in the kind of autism that's being diagnosed. 20 years ago, maybe 1 out of 4 would be the regressive autism. Regressive autism means that a child develops normally and then around 18 months or 2 years of age starts losing speech and
Right.
stopping to do all the things they did before.
Wow.
Now it's 4 out of 5 cases.
Wow.
4 out of 5 are regressive autism.
Wow.
So
okay.
that's why there is such a concern on the part of some scientists saying there's definitely some link here, something that's going on in the environment, because that's a bigger amount than
Than was
before, and it's not
previously.
your typical Canner type.
And who's
child.
diagnosing? Between parents, teachers, and medical professionals, pediatricians, I'm assuming.
It's a wide range, because some children may just have a few little things that people are worried about or concerned about, but they don't act so odd or different until they're a little bit older, that people say, wow, this child may have some autism. Kids that are on the less able end, you may notice it sooner because also they may be behind in their motor skills,
Right.
whereas the more able one may not. So sometimes it's the pediatrician, sometimes it's the parent. But, sometimes parents don't want to know that their child has a
Right.
problem, so they try not to see it. And other times, in my case, I had Jeremy in France, and I said, look, there's something wrong with my child. And I thought that he had autistic tendencies because I'd worked with people with autism.
Right.
And they kept saying, no, there's nothing wrong. He's just a little flaccid. No, there's nothing wrong. And eventually,
The parent wanted to know,
when
the medical professionals
I
didn't
still
want to
took him
know.
for physical education, and I taught him. I had to teach him everything: to roll over, to crawl, to sit up straight with his back. He didn't even have those reflexes where if you fall, you put your arms out. And when he finally got up and walked, the first thing he did was follow the pattern in the rug. He didn't walk to me, he didn't walk to his dad. He followed the pattern in the rug. And I said, that's it.
Right,
Nobody's
yeah.
going to tell me this kid doesn't have autism.
Yeah.
So, but yet all the professionals around were telling me, oh, you're just too worried. It's because you worked with people with autism before. Now you see it everywhere.
You can see, right. But that was your training and your background that actually
Exactly.
gave you that showed you that.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, now let's say that I am a mother and I'm like you, and I believe I have an autistic child, or I've had a diagnosis of autism. What can I do? I know you're writing a book, but what are some, quickly, some things maybe that I should be
Well, there are
thinking
some
about?
really good websites. First thing you should look on is the website of the Autism Society of America and also the Autism Research Institute.
Okay.
And he's based actually in San Diego, Dr. Bernard Rimland.
Okay.
And those are 2 good areas where you can learn what therapies and also what biomedical diets may be helpful for your child.
Okay, that's great. Chantal, it went so quickly, but
I
we're out
know.
of time. But thank you so much.
Thank you for having
It's very
me.
informative, and I think it'll be very helpful for some people out there.
Thank you.
Thanks again for watching us on Coffee Talk in Del Mar. I'm your host, Debi Salmon. Thanks to the Del Mar TV Foundation for making this program possible, and we'll see you on the next show.